Um, Hi all. So I have sent you an email about the reduction of assignments. So we won't have the second assignment, and we will have the midterm take-home term, obviously, due to April 16th. And you don't have to write two reflection papers, but it's enough to write just one. And if you've written already two, that's good, you'll have extra points. And we will have a final take-home paper for May 14th, but we will discuss about it later. So today we had a short article on race and the history of race, and we had another video by Kimberly Crenshaw on intersectionality. I'm going to start by the article, and I have asked you a question to respond in discussion groups about why is race cultural and not biological. And I really like the way that the group of Samantha's group responded on the discussion board. They say race goes beyond the physical traits of a certain group. Instead, as a society, we develop culture rules about race, and then those rules are applied when categorizing people. Yeah. So the categories that we apply and that are kind of predominant in culture still, they have no biological grounds, in other words. Or the way that we treat race, the way that race has become an issue in the world has no biological component. Or the way that racism has been playing out in different ways has no biological component, Smedley is saying. But interestingly, so she's giving examples of like when five white policemen shot a young unarmed African immigrant 41 times in the doorway. This doesn't have any biological component reason behind it, but it's just racism. But Smedley is reminding us that the way that people base their racist behavior may be on biology. Yeah, people try to legitimize their racist action basing on biological factors. Or Smedley is saying racism has impact on biology of human beings. How so? Racism kind of deprives certain groups of people from economic rights, health, or social status, we can say. And I really like this article because it's showing that the history of racism, how the history of racism has shaped, and we may tend to think that racism or the issue of race was always the same as it is now in our society, because it's a kind of an we are born into the way things are now in society. But Smedley is saying that the beliefs and ideas about race as it is now, or as it was in 19th or 20th century, was very different as it was lived in, say, 17th century. So and Smedley is kind of tracing it to the roots and saying, for example, giving the example of the colony in Virginia, Jamestown, in 1607, Smedley is saying, actually, there were African laborers, they were African workers. After British people came to the US and established colonies, African people were coming as workers, but they had the same rights as the British people had. Yeah, so these workers could have a wealth, could have rights, could vote, could marry. Interracial marriage was a right. They could vote, so they were just any other British man. But Smedley is saying when the kind of the colony has reached a crisis, when there was a lack of source of labor, Then the British man kind of enacted the law saying that the British man and the African man cannot have the same rights. And after establishing this legal enactment, then the slave trade began, so that and the racial prejudices, racial judgments were established after this legal enactment. So you can see that actually racial slavery is not deriving from cultural prejudices, but the cultural prejudices of racism, they are deriving from economic needs of the British man. And I find this point very interesting. So actually, the issue of race and the racism as we experience in the world is rooted in economic conditions of then colonies in the United States. And Smedley is also pointing out to the end of slavery, which ended in the 1860s. I'm going to read a passage from the article, page 7. It is third paragraph. So in the 1860s, slavery ended, but race as social status and the basis of our human identities remained. Race ideology proclaimed the existence of separate, distinct, and exclusive groups that were made unequal by God or nature. African Americans, the most inferior, were at the bottom of the hierarchy. European whites were at the top. Each race was taught to have distinct physical and behavioral traits that were inherited in the blood and passed on to their children. So this image that each race having taught to have different behaviors, physical or mental, those are human constructs. Those are cultural human constructs that are rooted in British legal enactments, but they also continue after the slavery legally ended. So, I mean, it's important to see the roots of the cultural racism as a cultural construct, but it's also important to acknowledge the fact that once slavery is officially ended, these prejudices still continue. And I mean, we could discuss the ways that it still continues, and I would like to see what you think in the comments about this issue, like about how racism continues after the abolishment of slavery in our world. And Kimberly Crenshaw, Intersectionality, I really like this video as well. So she is talking about African Americans killed by police. She's kind of beginning her talk with a little experience, right? So she's telling the names of people who were killed by who were killed by police, and people apparently know or have heard. More people have heard the names of the African Americans who were killed, who were male, but people haven't even known or haven't even heard of women, African American women who were killed. So she's kind of pointing out to the fact that actually to the fact that African American men, when they are killed by the police, there is a visibility around this. Yeah, we talk about them, we see them in the media, we talk about them. But when women are killed, when African American women are killed, we don't hear about them. We don't hear about them in the media, we don't hear about them in the newspapers. So she begins by pointing this fact. And she's saying that social justice problems like racism and sexism, they overlap in various ways. So, and they create multiple levels of social injustice. So, as I was saying, like there are systems of inequality, yeah? It's economic, it can be race, it can be ethnicity, it can be gender. So when we try to understand what each person experiences, we cannot just say that, oh, a black woman is experiencing sexism and racism. But when we try to understand the experience, we need to bear in mind that she's experiencing racism and sexism at the same time. And the fact that she's experiencing both means that she's experiencing multiple levels of social injustice. Yeah, that cannot be understood through the lens of solely race or solely sexism. And she's given a good example of Emma, this black woman, African American black woman, Emma, and she's saying that she's suing her employee because of like a person who didn't hire her, and she says that she applied for a job and she didn't get it because she was a black woman, and the judge dismissed the suit because the judge said employer actually did hire African American people and women, but Crenshaw is very well showing us that African American people that the employer hired were men, and they were working as industrial laborers, as workers, and the women that this person hired, they were working as secretaries or office jobs, and those women were white. So there was an actually as racial and sexist prejudice that was going on in this workplace. So, and she's saying that there is a lack in law, there was a lack in the law, in the discrimination law, that didn't kind of encompassed the experience that people who live at the intersections of multiple systems of inequality experience. Yeah, and she's saying it's important to acknowledge this because, as I think one group in a discussion board wrote, pointed out that she's saying if you do not name the problem, you cannot see the problem, and if you cannot see the problem, then you cannot solve the problem. So it's a problem of framing, it's a problem of seeing, it's a problem of constructing the accurate lens to see the problem. Yeah, I'm thinking of if there is something else I want to add. No, I look forward for your comments, and I'm not sure what we will do for Tuesday, but I will send you the article, or I will send you maybe we will watch a movie. So I'm gonna send you that information at the latest tomorrow, and I'm gonna send you the questions for the midterm this weekend, so you will have plenty of time to write the midterm till April. I think I said April 16th. April 16th is fine. There is no hurry. Okay, take good care. Bye.